And so that is at the heart of Lightgliders. But to your point about creating something that's for the family, we also had to think about that in terms of the gameplay, because you can create games that are addictive, and that force you to come back every day in order to keep growing your character, maybe growing your plants or whatever it is. If you're not ethical about it, people create games that create addicts. And we wanted to create something that created fans, not addicts.
All right, I am having a blast today, as every day here at The Plunge, with my friend Zach Fay. Zach, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me here, Holzer. It's a privilege.
Awesome. Zach, I met you now 3 years ago, I think.
That is correct. I believe 3 years ago, either this month or next month, but yeah, it's been 3 years.
Yeah. What a run it's been. As I recall, our introduction began with a mutual friend who suggested we talk about something called NFTs.
Well, actually, yes, that same mutual friend said, Zach, I have this friend who you need to meet because all he wants to talk about is the metaverse. And he goes, I go on walks with him and he talks about the metaverse. And at the time, I was speaking to a bunch of children's pastors about screen time technology and was touching on the metaverse. And so because I mentioned that word to our mutual friend, he said, you got to meet my friend Derek. You have to. All he wants to talk about is the metaverse. And I try to keep up, but I don't know what he's talking about half the time. And so anyway, that is what led to, and then my organization, Lightgliders, was approached by another organization to look at NFTs and what's called play to earn gaming. And that was where, once I brought that up to our mutual friend, you're right, that he said, okay, we've got to connect, you guys. And then it's been an incredible ride in friendship ever since, where we've not only talked about the metaverse and NFTs, but a world of different subjects over the last 3 years.
That's for sure. Well, our friend was right. I tend to, as you know now, go very deep into subjects that strike my curiosity. Hence the title of this podcast, The Plunge. So you brought up the play-to-earn gaming and NFTs, but also Lightgliders. Can you tell us a little bit about Lightgliders? What is Lightgliders?
Sure. Well, Lightgliders is a virtual world of Christian faith, games, and community, primarily for kids ages 6 to 12. And so what that means for the kids is they get to go online or in the app stores and access Lightgliders, and they get to create a character and play games and explore and socialize in a safe environment. And then for the parents and the churches and the ministries, it provides not only redemptive screen time, but also a weekly curriculum that encourages a biblical worldview, prayer and reflection, and vision for service. And actually also conversations, or catalysts for conversations. That Lightgliders is basically depending on how you define the word metaverse, it's an early metaverse, perhaps.
That makes sense. Well, I think at least I understand it, and I'm not a technologist, but I'm fascinated by technology. The metaverse is any digital domain where individuals can interact and conduct all manner of human endeavor and activity and expression. And you were motivated many years ago to start Lightgliders as a response to just the opportunity for providing a safe Christian environment for young people to gather virtually, right?
That's exactly right. Well, it's not that like many years ago I was like, hey, I want to start a metaverse or a Christian metaverse. That word wasn't even in my vocabulary. It wasn't because I wanted to start even a Christian game or a Christian technology project. I was someone who was looking for a culturally relevant and globally distributed way to impact kids before their teenage years. With those two criteria, I started researching kids and was seeing the rise in the not only screen time, I mean, it has moved from 3 to 4 hours a day to 7 to 10 hours a day among kids, but also these virtual world applications, or where kids were engaging with each other, playing games, building community, solving problems. And so my thought was, let's redeem that. Let's use that as a tool to encourage faith, values, and conversations.
Brilliant. Well, I love what you've done. It's only been 3 years of exposure for me, but I'm an avid fan and a passionate supporter. And I hope that the people who listen in to this will explore what Lightgliders is all about and join the party.
Well, if anyone joins the party, they'll find out very quickly that you are more than a supporter. You are a crucial part of this journey, not only for me personally, but for Lightgliders over the last 3 years. That is, like I said, it's a sincere privilege to be here with you on The Plunge today.
Thanks, man. Well, it harkens back to me. One of the core values that I carry is the desire to be as childlike as possible in all the best ways, while being a responsible grown-up and adulting well, to never lose the sense of joy and wonder and curiosity about the beauty of creation and the goodness of the people all around me, and being a light, so to speak. One of the questions I have as we talk about childhood here for a second is, when you were a boy, given that so many young children are into gaming, my son has been part of the Minecraft world for many years and has met up with his friends and chatted as they build things in Minecraft. Did you have any video games growing up or favorite stories, things that provoked your imagination?
I love that you've brought up both childlikeness and imagination. I think those two things go together. And just to back up for a second, one thing I really do appreciate about you is that subtle encouragement to have a childlike faith and a baptized imagination. And I think when it comes to imagination, I would say when it comes to games and imagination, yes, that's what's so interesting. I mean, I was never a big gamer growing up, but I love games. Like, I love playing sports. I still remember saving up all of my dollars. It cost $80 to buy a Nintendo Entertainment System back in the 80s. And I bought one, and I still remember a neighbor. He and I would play Super Mario Brothers. And when we finally won that game, my parents had to take a picture of us. And we were both standing there at, I don't know how old we were, maybe 8 years old, flexing our muscles with the little game cartridge in front of me. And looking back on that, I mean, that's like a core memory, but it's also something that's beautiful in the sense that this game brought me and my neighbor together to accomplish a goal. So anyway, not that I was thinking about that at the time, but yes, it is fascinating how games can capture our imaginations and then also bring us together with people. I know that's not normally what people think of when they think of games, but they really can. And what's happening now is that as games are being used to bring people together virtually, not just bring people together in the same room. And there's impact in both of those scenarios. Did I answer your question though?
That's great. That makes perfect sense. But as you referenced that you weren't a huge gamer, you were a huge basketballer. And I'm just curious, because we've had this conversation. I know that the world has had this conversation, but I just want to hear officially on the record from Zach Fay, who is the greatest basketball player in the history of the universe and why?
You mean besides Derek Holzer?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's not.
Well, I mean, there is no question that I'm a Jordan guy. I think not only can I tell you stories anecdotally about my childhood. Actually, it's interesting that we talk about imagination. I think Michael Jordan captured my imagination as a kid and inspired in me a love for the game of basketball, a desire to get better. I even had a couple moments where I interacted with him that I will never forget for the rest of my life. But apart from anecdotal material, the statistics, the championships, the legacy, I don't see anyone ever surpassing Michael, Jeffrey, and Jordan.
Undisputed in your mind.
It's undisputed. It absolutely is.
Well, I won't get us sidetracked by debating the merits of other players, but I will ask you to share your favorite anecdote of an encounter with Michael Jordan.
You know, I'll tell you, back in 2003, my father and I and my brother-in-law and one of my dear friends who I've known since I was 6, we decided to take a guys trip to Washington, D.C., where Michael Jordan was in his encore years. I mean, his time and his championships with the Bulls were over. He had already retired for 3 years, and he came back with the Washington Wizards. And we went to his second to last game and were mesmerized because Jordan, for some reason, just had this mystique about him. It was so fun to watch his second to last home game, especially with people that I care deeply about. I mean, to have done that with my father was amazing. And the thing I'll never forget is after the game, which was incredible, Jordan actually had a chance to win it at the buzzer. He missed the shot, but it was just surreal that he was in one of those situations that he was so calm in through his career and would usually hit the game winner. But he missed the shot, and we just were amazed that we got this chance to see him. That when we left the arena, we went to the MJ23 restaurant right across the street. And we grabbed a table, we were ordering a burger, and the doors open at this restaurant. And I don't know if you remember the name Charles Oakley.
Sure.
Charles Oakley walks in, who was an old basketball player. Then Patrick Ewing walks in, as a big time. He was on the Dream Team. And so my buddy and I were looking at each other going, this is Jordan's entourage. Like Oakley and Ewing, could it be? Is MJ about to walk in? And then before you know it, MJ walks right in. And there was a little VIP section of the restaurant that you had to walk by our table to get to. And I'll never forget this. These guys walked right behind my father. And my father just, looks at Oakley and nods at him, looks at Patrick Ewing and nods at him. And then Michael Jordan comes by. And my father was not a respecter of persons. He loved everybody. He showed care for everyone. He wasn't someone who was mesmerized very easily, or if at all. But this day he was. Michael Jordan walked by my father. So imagine Michael Jordan's walking right behind him. And my father looks up at him and says, "Hi, Mike." And Michael Jordan puts his big hands on my father's shoulders and says, "How you doing, sir? I hope you're having a good night." And then he walked on. And my buddy looks at my dad and says, "Mr. Fay, you just flirted with Michael Jordan." And it really was. I had never seen my dad just go, "Hi, Mike." Like it was surreal. And so anyway, it's something that we've talked about for more than 20 years now, because again, Michael Jordan had that mystique where if you were, if you saw him, you remembered it. And, there are not many people who provided that. And that's part of the reason I think, it will be hard to surpass him. There's, one or two people in entertainment, one or two people in sports. But I mean, like when they walk in the room, every eye in the room is on them.
Right.
And the atmosphere changes. And that's what it was like.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm going to make a very awkward segue. You mentioned atmosphere, and I want to talk about atmosphere of imagination and atmosphere about another enchanted world, and that is Glydian. Can you tell us what is Glydian? Where is Glydian?
Well, Glydian is the place that Lightgliders go visit. And when you enter the Lightgliders virtual world, you are being transported to the land of Glydian. And in Glydian, there are these cute creatures called the Gliddles. You can see a couple of them in the picture behind me. And you, as a Lightglider, are to grab a glider, put on some armor, and go into a dangerous area called the Yonders to rescue the Gliddles from the clutches of the machines. And it's all part of the gameplay that's inside Lightgliders. But more than that, Glydian, just thinking of imagination, is a mystical land, but it's also a key component to an interactive parable. And what I mean by that is a story that is meant to teach that kids get to enter into as one of the characters.
Nice. An interactive parable. That's a great term. I'm going to use that one, Zach. So Glydian is where the Lightgliders go, and where Gliddles are, and machines that are dangerous are. Who are the Lightgliders?
Well, the Lightgliders, yeah, the Lightgliders are. I mean, there were 7 original ones, and they're all behind me in this picture back here. And these guys are all from different areas of the world and different times in history, and they are basically the first class of light gliders. But beyond that, every kid in the world has the chance to be a light glider. All they have to do is go to lightgliders.com and sign up, and they will get to create their character and go on these missions to rescue glittles and explore Glydian, which is also a place that has been contaminated by a mysterious substance called the blight. And you, as a light glider, need to use your light to clear the blight and restore the land. And so Glydian is a place where glittles and kids partner together to restore the world, or restore the land of Glydian, the mystical land of Glydian. And so it's fun from a gameplay standpoint, it's fun from a story standpoint, and then it's also very important from a teaching standpoint.
Beautiful. Thank you. And can you tell me maybe just a little bit more about the characters and creatures in Glydian? Like, I understand there are some legends of a couple of older scientist type guys, and then of course, you know, the glittles themselves, and where the machines come from. What's that? What's happening there?
I mean, Lightgliders is an ever expanding story that kids get to discover. There's a lot of mysteries to Glydian, but as you engage with it, both in the virtual world and in the books that are coming out soon, you will learn that there are some key characters. I don't know how much I want to share right now because there's some things that are in the book that I don't know I want to reveal yet. But ultimately, these 7 light gliders look up to a professor named Professor Watts, who is actually lost. He's not there in key area of Glydian called Lightglider Academy. But Professor Watts helped build this place called Lightglider Academy, which is really like the safe zone in Glydian. It's the place where light gliders come to train, learn the goals and values of a light glider, and then be equipped and empowered to go out into the yonders to go on these missions. And so we have events inside Lightglider Academy really every day, going back to the virtual connectivity part or the metaverse part of Light Gliders. But Professor Watts is a key character, but he also has a nemesis named Dr. Grapethorn, who is creating these machines for the purposes of capturing glittles. And so Watts is training Light Gliders to go out there and rescue the glittles and restore the land. And you could say Grapethorn is really doing the exact opposite. And it really is the clash of 2 very different worldviews when it comes to Watts and Grapethorn. And ultimately, from a teaching standpoint, you know, one of the things that I'm really passionate about helping kids discover is that there's a difference between a good idea and a bad idea. An idea that encourages human flourishing and an idea that causes destruction. And usually the ideas that encourage human flourishing are based upon love and dignity and freedom and joy, and the ideas that cause destruction are based off of the exact opposite of those things.
Wow. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Is Grapethorn missing as well, or is he in?
He is not. His presence is very much known, similar to Watts, but I wouldn't say he's missing. I would say he's out there in the yonders, but we just don't know where. But you could also say that about Watts. Actually, we don't know, because the difference is these guys are human, which means they come from our world. So the question is, are they there in Glydian right now? Are they here on Earth? You know, one of the things for the kids to discover is as they play Light Gliders is what has happened, where are they? And part of their goal is to find out.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned books. So as I understand it, there's a series of middle grade novels underway. Can you tell us?
As you understand it, you are the co-author of these books, my friend. Yes, the Lightglider Origins.
Today
series.
I am a host of The Plunge. So okay. Tell me about these books.
Well, I referenced how 3 years ago we got together, and you have been crucial not only for me personally, but for Light Gliders as a whole. And part of that story has been this incredible opportunity to have you be really the lead author on a series of 7 middle grade fiction books called Lightglider Origins. That's what the series is called, where we dive deep into each of these characters behind me, into their story of how they got to Glydian, what happened there, the challenges they're facing in their world and time in history, and then the challenges they face in Glydian. And so it really is a series of origin stories that will help the kids who have been playing Lightgliders for, whether they've been playing for months or years. It will help them even more so dive deep into the lore of Glydian and understand why Lightgliders were made to shine, which is the tagline of a Lightglider. You were made to shine. And so you will discover as you read these books a really fun and fantastical journey where these characters come to life in ways that a game never could allow them to.
Yeah, it's been a joy. I love collaborating with you, creating with you, and really I think we've discussed this from the outset, but working to sort of build the official canon, the lore for each of these characters, answer questions that maybe players have posed over the years in terms of whether or not different Lightgliders had brothers or sisters, and do they go back home? Do people miss them? What was their life like on Earth before they came to Glydian? And of course, as we unpack their origin stories in a succession of novels, we're also diving into some of those mysteries you referenced with respect to Glydian's origins and Professor Watts and Dr. Grapethorn.
Yeah, they'll find, I don't know if any Lightgliders will watch this, but they'll find a lot of history before these 7 characters came, where there was civil war among the Gliddles, and there's a lot there that can be unpacked. And the part that I get excited about is, from a story standpoint, this is where our partnership has been just such a blessing to me, because you have that childlike imagination where you're creating things that I never would have dreamed of. And so that has just added so much. But the thing that I get so excited about in the stories is how these characters' lives are changed because of their experiences in Glydian. And just from a teaching standpoint, I think that's what parables do. I mean, we have been impacted for 2,000 years by the story of the prodigal son and the story of the Good Samaritan. And the idea that we can enter into a story and it changes these characters, but, we have real world testimonies of kids who enter the mystical land of Glydian and their lives are being impacted. And so that's just the power of story, the power of virtual connectivity, and the power of what we could call a baptized imagination, using imagination for real good. And real transformation in kids' lives, and you've brought all that to the table with these books. So I thank you.
Well, it's been a lot of fun, and I would say as well a couple of things. Obviously, we were inspired by the Narnia series as children in our own right, stories from Tolkien, George MacDonald, and Mark Twain, but really wanting to bring a new dimension to the world of the Lightgliders. And I have to say that incredibly grateful to New Growth Press and their team in taking a chance and giving us this opportunity to publish a 7-novel series. It's virtually unheard of, particularly for a couple of guys without a whole lot of track record at writing. And so I'm just grateful to New Growth Press for the opportunity.
Absolutely. They've been phenomenal. And to see the first book, which comes out in a few weeks, the artwork.
It'll come out in 1 week, Zach, on February 3rd.
Oh, okay. Wow.
That's correct.
That's amazing. What a journey.
Yeah. Yes.
That's awesome.
So February 3rd, you can pick up Bryce and the Lost Pearl anywhere you buy your books. So we've understood Lightgliders, but I want to understand a little bit more about Zach Fay and this work that you're doing. So could you just take a couple minutes and tell me, how did you actually end up launching this digital Christian metaverse for children? I know you explained you were looking for a impactful, globally distributed method for reaching kids before the teen years, but how did you actually do this?
Great question. I would say the answer to that question could take a long time to answer, but I'll try to just summarize 3 key things. The first is my father. The second is my experience as a youth pastor. And then the third is a series of miracles that have allowed this journey to continue to proceed as it has. So, number one, my father mentioned him earlier with the Michael Jordan story, but my dad was a huge influence on my life. He was someone who put me to bed at night when I was a kid, basically every night, and we would talk, we'd pray, we'd read scripture, and we'd share life. Like, I felt nothing but love from my father and joy in his relationship with Christ, and it truly had an impact on me at a young age, 7, 8 years old. So much so that I felt like at that age, I had a relationship with Jesus Christ. I had a childlike faith and imagination where I knew Jesus was real and involved in my daily life. And I was excited about the purpose that he had for me. I was excited about the identity he had given me. And ultimately, as I got older, I realized that was kind of a unique testimony, being led to a relationship with Jesus through the influence of a parent. And I remember thinking that shouldn't be the case. Like, I think, if you look at, Deuteronomy 6, we're supposed to pass down our faith to the next generation. And hopefully it's a faith based in love and grace and authentic relationship. And that's what I had with my father. And so that was crucial for me, especially because after college, my first job was to be a youth pastor. And so I began spending, and I guess this is part 2 in the story, I spent countless hours with junior high and high school students and loved it. It was a blast, and still keep up with those kids, a lot of those kids to this day. In fact, I talked to one on the phone just about an hour ago. But ultimately, I spent so much time with junior high and high school students, I remember thinking, I wish we could start younger. I wish we could start before the teenage years. And so I started doing some research on kids and found out that the critical years to impact kids in the area of faith and values is before the teenage years. So that was something that really stuck with me. And then I thought about my own testimony, which was, wow, yeah, it really was before the teenage years. I think it's even the Barna Research Group that made this statement many years ago. But they said, we're largely who are going to be in life by the age of 13. And all information we get after that is to really just substantiate the foundation that's already been laid. Now, we know that anything can happen at any age. Like, your worldview could change at any age, your faith could change at any age. But primarily, where we're most kind of open, and statistically, it's before the teenage years. And so that stuck with me. And then it really just became this strange obsession that I cannot fully understand. And this is where the miracles part came in. I shared about Dad, I shared about being a youth pastor, but I got obsessed with just finding a solution to reach kids before the teenage years. And when I finally felt like I landed on that solution, the Lord gave me a unique perseverance and encouragement to go after it, because I'm not someone, once I realized the popularity of virtual worlds, Derek, I had never been in a virtual world. I wasn't a gamer growing up. I still, to this day, am not a technology guy. I'm not the one doing the coding or anything like that. I just saw this as an opportunity. And then going back to my father, when I was finishing some graduate studies, usually after you finish school, you're supposed to go get a job. And that's what I thought I was supposed to do, but I couldn't get this idea that was Lightgliders out of my head. And I still remember Christmas of 2008, actually. So it's been a long time since I first got started on this, but Christmas of 2008, I had just finished grad school. I was looking for what that next thing is, job-wise. And my father gave me a Christmas card that year. And usually when you get a Christmas card from a parent without a gift attached to it, you think there's going to be some money in it or a check or a gift card or something. There was nothing like that in there. What was in there it was just a short note, and it said, "Pursue this dream. Love, Dad." And for me, that was the blessing of a father saying, hey, take this leap. You're going to have to go find a game design studio. You're going to have to go raise capital. You're going to have to really sell this vision to other people because, you don't have the wherewithal to do it by yourself, skills-wise, people-wise, money-wise. And I strangely got obsessed. And I wasn't married at the time. I didn't have other responsibilities. So it was just like, okay, let's go do this. And that's where 2 weeks later, I started the organization that eventually became Lightgliders. And it would take many hours to talk through the number of miracles and doors that have opened and continued to stay open over the years, because we launched the first iteration of Lightgliders about 10 and a half years ago. It took 5 years just to raise the first initial capital and find the right people involved to help develop this brand and the game world. Ultimately, when you start something from scratch, you have to have a lot of confidence and a lot of ignorance. And when the years go by, you realize, wow, the ignorance is gone, but maybe so has some of the confidence because had I known what it would take to get even to the place that we are today, there's no way I would have started it. So I'm very thankful that the Lord only gives us enough light for the next day.
Yeah.
Your word is a lamp unto my feet. So the next step I can see, but I can't see too far ahead. And that's true even to this day. I don't know what the Lord has in mind for Lightgliders. I've had advisors say to me, during really difficult times, hey, did you ever think that it might be the Lord's will that Lightgliders die? And I have had to go through that season as well because of just having open hands about it. And I think that's the thing, like trying not to have a clenched fist and have an open hand and say, okay, Lord, where do you want to take us now? And, what's been really fun about meeting you is he's taken us down the road of doing what I always wanted to see happen, which was to take Lightgliders out of the game world and into transmedia properties such as books and videos and stuff like that. And so we'll see where the Lord ends up taking us, but it's been quite a wild ride.
Wow. Thank you, Zach. You mentioned the miracles along the way. One of the most important miracles we always encounter are the people in our lives. And speaking of that, I'm curious about how the team that you have, as you mentioned, you're not coding, you're not building the game worlds from a technical aspect. How does the team help Lightgliders become such an awesome world to visit?
They do. They make it happen. The team's incredible. So again, I could spend hours talking about the team, but I'll tell you one key component of the team is our game design studio that helped make this become a reality. Their CEO began pursuing us just as much as we were pursuing them. And they've worked with huge organizations, Disney, Cartoon Network, but they really were intrigued with this idea and being involved. And I still remember saying to them, hey, you guys have put together so many wonderful proposals. You guys are offering incredible ideas. And I have told you that we are a 2-person organization that hasn't raised $1 yet. Why are you so interested? And their CEO said to me, Jack, I didn't want this to be part of my pitch because it sounds maybe kind of cheesy, but I've been creating digital games and virtual worlds for kids for 15 years now. But what you don't know is I've been the elder of youth at my church for 20 years. And as I look at this project, I can't help but wonder if my entire career has been pointing me and preparing me for something like this. And so that was the beginning of an incredible relationship with our game design studio that has been a many-year relationship. And then in the process, some incredible people, some who work with me here in St. Louis, Missouri, and others who are located in different cities in the United States and even around the world, have presented themselves. We don't have like any formal recruiting or hiring thing. I am going back to the miracles thing. I'm amazed at the team that we have. And you've been at our team meetings. You see there are people who have been with us for many, many years who are so dedicated, and what they do in Lightgliders every day through moderation. I mean, we have kids who write us fan mail to the moderators all the time because their lives are being impacted by these moderators. Because inside of Lightgliders, we have events in the game every day, and there's, Bible studies and prayer meetings, but there's also fun events, and the kids just come in and just love knowing, almost like that old show Cheers, where everybody knows your name. They get so excited just to come and show up and know that they're going to be welcomed by a familiar avatar face.
Yes.
Because the reality is, for safety reasons, we have no idea who these kids are. Like, everything's anonymous, but they feel care there because our team is so spectacular. We have a team of people who really have ministry hearts but are also really good at what they do.
Yeah. So essentially, as I perceive it, and yes, I support wholeheartedly your comments on the team. I have witnessed them and met them many of them in person. Wonderful, extraordinary people who deeply care about the next generation. Just for those parents, grandparents who might be listening, you mentioned the anonymity and the security and safety for children. Obviously, that's a high priority, the top priority.
It is. It's the top. Yeah.
Yeah. And my impression has been that essentially there's some of the best children's pastors in the world interacting online in in Lightgliders.
Well, I'm biased, so I all I can do is affirm. I would say yes, and also doing it in a way that's really full of joy and also it's interesting when it comes to online interactions. Like it's different. So we have a safe chat system. We have
Could you explain a little bit about that?
sure, yeah. So a lot of times people are fearful of virtual connections of kids because it's a free for all, and you can chat and talk, and that's where dangerous things can happen because you don't know who the other person is on the other line. So what we have is we have probably one of the safest chat systems ever, which is why Lightgliders usually appeals to, the younger kids, like 6 to 12. I would say like 8 to 12, 8 to 13 is kind of our sweet spot. But as kids age up, they want more robust social features. And honestly, we're just not going to offer it to them because that opens up a whole nother set of issues. So with our safe chat system, there are only words that we allow, and then our moderators start conversations about different topics. And we have parties in the game, themed parties where the entire Lightglider Academy will be decorated a certain way. In fact, next week we're having a snowing safari party. So the whole academy and the yonders will be filled with winter animals and snow, and kids will go on a safari looking for these different kind of exotic winter animals like polar bears and stuff like that. And we'll have mystery codes, which are basically like fun ways for the kids to get new gear for their Lightglider. We'll have mystery codes attached to all the different animals. And so the kids will go out on basically a big safari scavenger hunt. And so going back to your question or point, like our moderators really have a heart for kids and then know how to interact with them online. And that's a specific skill set.
Yeah. And I would say as well that at the heart of everything you do is supporting the family. A lot of contemporary video games have elements that certainly could increase rebellious attitudes or desire to disobey, temptation. And one of the things that Lightgliders does is weekly emails that provide parents with talking points and conversation elements that are connected to the activities in the game. Could you speak a little bit about that? And then could you maybe personalize it and tell us what a week in the Faye family looks like?
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of fun. So first, to answer your question, yes, I realize I've had to become a game designer and someone who gets excited about virtual worlds and digital games over the last number of years. But at the heart of Lightgliders, it's a tool for family conversations and discipleship. Like we want it to be a tool that redeems the screen time and encourages quality family time. In fact, the statistic that kind of blew me away back in the day is that the average kid spends 5 to 7 hours a day, now 7 to 10 hours a day in front of a screen, and less than 20 minutes in quality time with mom or dad every day. And so what we wanted to do was redeem the screen time to maximize the quality time. And so with Lightgliders, every week there's a new Bible-based theme verse, and series of activities that are connected to that theme. Like I said, there's a whole curriculum in Lightgliders, a whole year-long curriculum. But then we send that material to the parents every week. So it's front and center to the kids, but it's also front and center to the parents, so that if they want to leverage that for a conversation at the dinner table or like my father did before bed, those are those moments where seeds of truth and hope and love are planted and they produce fruit. And so that is at the heart of Lightgliders. But to your point about creating something that's for the family, we also had to think about that in terms of the gameplay, because you can create games that are addictive and that force you to come back every day in order to keep your whatever, keep growing your character, maybe growing your plants or whatever it is. Games, if you're not ethical about it, people create games that create addicts. And we wanted to create something that created fans, not addicts. And so sometimes people say, hey, my kid didn't, I want to give them a tablet and then have them go away for a while, and your game, was fun, but they didn't play for the 3 hours that I wanted them to play. Honestly, that's intentional. We designed the gameplay in Lightgliders so that you could dip in every day, and you would want to come in through the course of a year rather than go finish the game in one sitting. Because we don't want to be a game that you come in for 4 or 5 hours at a time. We want to be a game that you come in when you feel like it, but dip in, maybe do one of the devotional videos, play one of the games, maybe attend one of the events. I don't know, but then you step out and you go shine in the real world.
Nice. That's really speaks to character and the vision that you have. And so, still, how does that manifest? Because you have a very full household.
I do. I started Lightgliders and I was a single guy, and now I am married with 4 kids, ages 7 and under. And so every day in my house is an adventure. We have a lot of fun in the Faye household. I will say this, my wife and I are starting to get better at waking up between 4:30 and 5 in the morning, only because if we want any time to ourselves, by 5:45 there are kids up and we need to be moving. But yeah, life in the Faye household is so fun. There's a lot of dance parties. There's a lot of wrestling. I have 3 boys and a girl, and the girl wants to be one of the boys. So we are all wrestling on a little blow up wrestling mat every night. We just have a lot of fun. But the one thing I will say that both my father and then also Lightgliders has influenced is bedtime is just critical in our house. Like that is where I want to make sure that I get some time with each of those kids before they go to bed, make sure that we pray together or that we have a conversation or both, because it's amazing, when you're trying to just keep them alive, fed and clothed and at school on time, all of that stuff, if you're not careful, is so exhausting that being intentional about other things sometimes can get lost. And so I'm really thankful that through the influence of the family I grew up in, and then honestly, because the heart of Lightgliders is family discipleship, like it's always in the back of my mind. Like, am I looking for those windows of opportunity with my own kids to have a great conversation, knowing that conversations are the seeds for transformation?
Any practical tip that's really benefited you with your kids?
I mean, I go back to it. I've probably already said it multiple times, but be intentional at bedtime.
Perfect. Yeah, I agree. I don't have them underfoot like you do anymore. They're flying out of the nest at my place, but I agree. Bedtime is a priority. It's a sacred moment for sure. We're nearing the last few questions, but I kind of wanted to hear a little bit of vision. What would you like to see Lightgliders become in the next 5 years?
Great question. I would like to see Lightgliders become a trusted transmedia brand for kids and families. And what do I mean by trusted? I mean something that there's a clear brand identity to it. It is fun, engaging, winsome, faith-based, full of love, transformational, all the things that we aspire to be. And then transmedia in the sense that, Lightgliders, the virtual world of Lightgliders is probably the primary gateway into Lightgliders, but I look forward to developing these secondary gateways, such as the books. I mean, we have 7 books coming out over the next couple of years. And we just started a new podcast for families called the Glittle Podcast. And then I look forward to seeing what other transmedia opportunities would come out where people could be exposed to faith and fun through Lightgliders in different ways. I also am curious to see where we could take Lightgliders in other virtual spaces, going to Metaverse 2.0 or 3.0. There's a lot that's being developed there. I think there's a lot of opportunity, but I still think we're in year 0, year 1 when it comes to Metaverse applications. So if it makes sense for Lightgliders to have a presence in some of those spaces, that would be spectacular.
Awesome. And Lightgliders is in year 1, so to speak, with respect to its legal designation. As you mentioned, you raised the capital, you started Lightgliders as a for-profit enterprise, and did that for the last 14 or so years. And now Lightgliders has pivoted to become a C3 nonprofit, technically educational religious ministry. What do you think about that? What opportunities have arisen as a result of this transition, and how does that shape the way you think about it going forward?
That's a great question that I need to unpack in many different ways in my own mind and heart, because I started Lightgliders basically as a kingdom entrepreneur. I wanted to start a business that had a triple bottom line, where we had financial profit, social profit, and spiritual profit, or impact, I guess you could say, on all three of those levels. And ultimately, going through the process, I learned that Christian digital gaming, believe it or not, is not in most people's investment theses. So raising capital for Lightgliders ended up being really hard, and then scaling Lightgliders ultimately, I think, would be really, really hard without having access to significant capital. So long story short, we ended up flipping into a nonprofit structure, which actually, to the heart of your question, what does that mean for Lightgliders? Well, it means I can focus now more on impact than on, I don't have to focus on profit anymore. I do need to focus on raising donation money, but Lightgliders also has some revenue streams, which is great as well. But what's super exciting, again, to the heart of your question, is what does that mean for the platform itself? And in this next year, we're going to really be able to open up the platform and allow anyone from around the world to have access to it, because we aren't having to focus so much on the subscription revenue. So what does that mean at a practical level? It means Lightgliders as a model will move to a freemium model, where any kid around the world will be able to go in and have a huge amount of Lightgliders available to them. And then if they want to have all access, then they can get a subscription. And what that means for us from an impact level is glorious, because Lightgliders has had, I think the last time I looked at the data, has had over 100,000 kids in it from over 100 countries, and that's good. But once we open up to freemium, that's going to allow many, many, many more kids to have access to the content, to the gameplay, to be exposed to the brand. And so I really do look forward to that, and that mixed with some of the other transmedia opportunities that we're exploring, and then also the ones that we're currently pursuing. I think it could be spectacular. Now, it also, going back to open hands, anything could happen. I think that's the big difference in my own mind and heart since I started this, is I am really just along for the ride. Yes, I'm like one of the stewards of this, but I really want the Lord to lead this where he wants it. And then if I'm allowed to be in the car with him, great. If he kicks me out in the process, that may happen too. Again, I'm just trying to have open hands about it. But I think one of the big changes in my own life and in my own heart has been not holding on to it so tightly and trying to force it to work, because it looks so different than when I had this idea back in 2009.
Yeah, man. Well, I've learned a lot from you, Zach. I really admire the way that you carry forward in this work. And as you say, keep an open hand about it, always seeking counsel. You're one of the best guys I know at asking for counsel from people around you and getting collective wisdom in your enterprise. Lightgliders is a nonprofit now. And of course, the follow-up that I have to that is, I'm sure parents, grandparents, teachers, pastors hearing about Lightgliders for the first time, what's the best way that they can get involved if they'd like to?
The best way to get involved would be to go to www.lightgliders.com and click the donate button, not because I'm saying you need to donate, but in the donate page, there's a series of questions. One of them is, how do I stay involved? And there's an email list where you can put your email in there, and we will send out updates and opportunities to get involved, be involved with the prayer team, be involved in telling your church or your homeschool community or any ministry group that you think might be interested. But there are definitely ways. Obviously, I guess I'm thinking like a nonprofit now, but prayer and then fundraising are the two things that immediately come to mind. But there's going to be some promotion things that people can get involved with as well. And so the best thing is to stay in touch, and anyone who's listening to this can just flat out email me, Zach@lightgliders.com, or join our email list, and we'll send you updates on how to be involved in ways that specifically meet that you might be interested in. Ultimately, Lightgliders is for people who care about the next generation and are intrigued with the idea of reaching that generation in ways that the church hasn't historically reached them in. And that's what Lightgliders is all about.
That's great. Well, I can say, my limited purview, I don't know of anything out there that's an equal to Lightgliders in offering this type of opportunity, this type of space for kids to be safe, to be exploring their imagination, and to hear fantastic stories and virtual parables that inspire them to be a light wherever they go. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience about yourself or your vision for Lightgliders?
I think we've covered quite a bit. I could tell you about the other time I met Michael Jordan if you want, but we could save that for a different time.
That'd be great in the outtakes.
Yes.
The bonus edition,
yeah,
when we release this.
No, I there's nothing specific that comes to mind. I'm just so grateful to be here. And I want to thank you for opening my eyes to aspects of the faith that I hadn't really thought about. I would say that, in full disclosure, you and I have been in kind of a virtual small group for the last couple of years where books that are fascinating, different people's spiritual journeys are kind of discussed in ways that are really compelling. And again, going back to, and maybe this is just the kick I'm on right now, but childlike faith and a baptized imagination, like I really appreciate you being someone who has encouraged me in both of those facets of my spiritual journey. And so, yeah, I'll always be a Derek Holser and the Plunge fan. That's for sure.
Thanks, Zach. Well, it's Mutual Admiration Society, and so I'd love for you to just go ahead and tell the story about the other Michael Jordan encounter.
Okay, so the other Michael Jordan encounter was when I was 12 years old. So many, many years before the one I told you about earlier. So when I was 12 years old, I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and I found out from my 5th grade teacher that Michael Jordan, this is before he won all the championships, so this is 1989. Michael Jordan, so I guess I was 11 years old. Michael Jordan held a basketball camp in outside of Chicago at a place called Elmhurst College. And so when we found this out, I just asked my dad, could I go? And Dad said, yes, let's do this. So we drove up to Chicago. I spent a week at Michael Jordan's basketball camp. The guy was there every day playing pickup with the kids, doing seminars, doing drills with the kids. He even called me up to play him in one-on-one, which I will never forget. He won, by the way, but
it was real close.
It was extremely close. But anyway, at the end of that camp, Dad drove back up to pick me up. Again, not too far away. Chicago and St. Louis are not far away. Drove back to pick me up. Michael Jordan was doing closing ceremonies. He was, thanking everyone for coming. And because he's Michael Jordan, he was going to get bombarded when it's over. So they had already had this planned out where he would hand the microphone back to one of the coaches and then he would bolt out the door and they would continue with the closing ceremonies. So as soon as he handed the microphone back to one of the coaches, I don't know what got into my father, but my dad said, "Zach, follow me." So we get off of the bleachers and we go out the door that Michael Jordan went out of. And we see him way ahead of us. He's about to get inside a car and drive away. And about 30 yards away from the car, he is getting in the car. My dad yells out, Mike, can my son get a picture with you?" Michael Jordan is already in the car, but he hears that.
Wow.
Michael Jordan gets out of the car and takes a picture with 11-year-old Zach Fay that has been hanging in my room ever since.
I'm sure your wife loves it.
So anyway, that's my other Michael Jordan story.
That's awesome. Thanks, Zach. This is a blast.
So fun. Thanks for having me here.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Don't go anywhere yet. Today's episode of The Plunge is sponsored by the word fearless. 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 It's an adjective that means brave, courageous. A lot like Bryce, now that I think about it. You know, the word fearless is also an album by Taylor Swift, but we're here talking about the word fearless. But there's a trajectory of the use of the word. First recorded mention of the word fearless was 1540. As we've progressed over the centuries, there have been ebbs and flows of courage and bravery, as well as fear, that have swept over our people, our planet, our culture. The plunge is all about taking deep dives and exploring in abundance with great hope and expectancy that in the end, good wins out. Love is the greatest of all. And so I'm grateful to you for living a fearless life. The more people who live without fear, the more light can be spread to the dark places. Thank you, Fearless, for sponsoring today's episode of The Plunge.